This is a round window, and for the first time I'm going to be trying to make a round bead. My name's Tom, I'm a round window maker, and in this series I'm going to be pushing my craft to the limit. Starting here with the most simple build, all the way up to the most complicated round windows I can think of. So the round bead has three main challenges, all of which I'm going to try and overcome in this video. But before making the bead, I'm going to have to make the frame for the bead to fit into. Okay, now that's done, I know the exact diameter which I need to make the bead to, which is 40 centimeters. So let's get into the first issue whilst making this bead, and that is how thin it is. So when any piece of wood is this thin, it's liable to break. And when a thin piece of wood like this is joined in a circle, or with just butt joints, then the risk of breakage increases a lot. So when cutting this circle, I have to do it in stages. So first of all, I'm using a new router bit to make sure the cut is perfectly smooth. So I cut my circle. Usually now I would cut the inner circle and that would be the piece complete. But because this is so thin, I can't actually do that yet. First, I'm going to need to reinforce these joints. So I've got the outer perimeter cut, now I've got to biscuit joint it before I do the inner one. It's about to be the most awkward biscuit joint ever. Little did I know that I had just made my first mistake. So it's the next day and I can continue with this bead. Now usually I would cut these excess biscuit joints with a jigsaw and then sand them smooth, but this always leaves flap spots. So this time, luckily, because the thing is still clamped onto the table, I can just use the router and trim the excess. Now I have a reinforced bead that I can continue to cut. Although before that, I would like to bring the whole bead down to thickness. I can easily do that by using a wider router bit and taking off the amount that I need to from the surface. It would be so easy and quick to do it this way, but when I look at how high the biscuit joints are, I realise it's not possible. This was my mistake from yesterday. I cut the biscuit joints too close to the top, so now if I remove that 5mm to make the bead the right thickness, I'll be cutting into the biscuits. So I need to cut from the other side. But I can't do that now because it's clamped to the table. If I move it, then I'll never be able to get it perfectly centered again. So that's something I'm going to have to try and figure out later on. I cut my inner circle to release the bead from the wood. And there it is, the bead in its basic shape. And here we come to the second issue. So the bead is, as I just said, the bead is too thick. And I haven't managed to thicken it the way I'd planned to. So I need to think of another way. I considered using a belt sander, but I know this won't produce a uniform flat surface, so I decided to use my router sled, which I've only once used in the past. This is a super high risk way of thicknessing a bead, but if it works, then it's going to be good and accurate, and it's easy to do at home. But if it goes wrong, it goes spectacularly wrong. Because this is such a thin bead, if the router picks it up, it could easily blend the bead into pieces before I knew what's happened. As I cut, the bead is spinning around in the form like this. So I secure it more strongly with some screws and I managed to get a fairly good surface on the bead. Either way, it's all the right thickness now, and that is challenge 2 complete. The final challenge relates to the seasonal expansion of the wood. As this bead is on the outside of the window, it's going to see some fairly large changes in relative humidity over the course of the year. So it needs to be able to expand and contract freely within the frame, and as a full circle it's not going to be able to do that. So on this window I try something that I've never tried before. I cut the bead in two. But I make a mistake and I use a saw with a blade that is too thick and I cut too much off. I should have used a fine saw, but I didn't. I thought I would have to start this again. But I made a second cut with a fine saw just in case to have a look. And now that the gap is shared between left and right, it actually finished with quite a good space. The client will also be painting this whole window, so that will reduce the gap a little bit more even. And there you have it. Next episode I'll be making a jamb extension for this very window. That'll be the first time I've made one of them, second time I've made one of them too, but with new challenges. Subscribe to follow along with ever more complicated round window builds. See you next time.